Hey College and Career Success, this is your week 6 video that's going to cover chapter 5. So I'm going to jump right in, click into our week 6 here. Alright, so in this chapter in this week, you can see here are the assignments that we're going to be working on. I'm going to go ahead and pull up the chapter 5 PowerPoint, which is under the materials area. So the chapter slides are always right in there, and I'm just going to go through the concepts real quickly for you so that you have an understanding, and then of course you can get into more depth with the actual textbook. So chapter 5 is about demonstrating your knowledge and skills. So it's a lot about like test taking and writing papers and giving presentations, ways that you will demonstrate to your instructors or to classmates or whomever it might be that you know what you're talking about and you've met kind of the objectives. Okay, so the first section of our text in this chapter starts talking about like, why do we have to do these kind of things? Well, because in every class you have objectives, which are actually usually called, the objectives or the outcomes. And then in every program, it has like the bigger outcomes. So yes, you take individual classes, but those all fall under a program, which basically fall under your degree. And so all of those have different standards you have to meet. And so to meet those standards, you usually have to demonstrate your learning through an assessment of some sort. So part of that means knowing what academic integrity is and adhering to those. So integrity means basically you're doing the right thing in terms of like that honesty in learning. So if you spend time in your high school or collegiate career and you're not being academically honest, it's going to kind of be a disadvantage to you later on. You're not going to be able to kind of be dishonest throughout your entire career. So, making sure that you're learning and doing the quote unquote like right way of learning. So what does academic dishonesty look like? Well, sometimes it's very clear cut. Plagiarism, presenting someone else's work as your own, whether that means like someone else did your homework for you, you just slap your name on it, or you literally like copied and pasted or printed off someone else's work. Or giving someone an unfair advantage, whether it's you giving someone an unfair advantage or they give you an unfair advantage. So those are kind of like obvious ways that you can be academically dishonest. So how can you be academically honest? Well, first of all, know like what it means to plagiarize and cheat. Plagiarism is funny in a way because sometimes you can plagiarize and not even know it. So that's why it's important to know the definition of plagiarism. Sometimes you might get an idea from a source and then put it in your own words, but you don't cite the source. That's still plagiarism. You're not giving credit to the original source. So if you're reading something and you're like, oh, this sounds really great, this kind of sparks an idea, but you don't give credit to that original source, that is plagiarism. Plagiarism is not just always blatant copy and pasting. It's not giving credit to the original source. You can also plagiarize off yourself, which I know is a weird concept, but let's say you wrote a paper in the fall semester and then you have a class in the spring semester and you're like, oh, this topic actually aligns really well with something I wrote about in the fall, and you turn in the exact same paper. That is plagiarism. You're cheating off of yourself unless you talk to the professor and say, hey, I wrote this paper in the fall. I think it could fit really well. How can I, make some adjustments so it fits? That's a conversation you can have, and then they'll probably let you know if that's okay or if you need to adjust or whatever that looks like. So other ways to make sure you're academically honest, make sure you just keep your goal on learning. I know some people really love their GPA, and it's important to have a high GPA. It is. You don't have to have a perfect GPA. I can tell you from experience that oftentimes when we're looking at people's resumes, we don't really look at their GPA. We look to see, did they take the courses? Do they have the skills? Do they have the experience? There are only certain fields where GPA becomes really important. So that's why you want to focus on learning as your goal, as opposed to just like your grades. Sometimes those go hand in hand, but if you're only focused on grades, you may not always get the most out of the information because you're so focused on, oh, I just got to pass this test and then I can move on. But if you're focused on learning, you're more than likely going to remember, retain, and then be able to apply later on that information, which if you really learn the information, you're more than likely going to get a high grade anyway. So prepare well for exams, study, make sure that you don't need to cheat because you've managed your time and energy enough that you can feel prepared, which goes into the next one. Use time management, learn how to cite sources. There are lots of resources on campus on how to do this. And actually for step 5 of our final project, I'll talk a little bit more about citation as well. And I'm going to show you a few sites also. Actually, just let me go ahead and do that now. So one of the places I often direct students is Citation Machine. Now, I'm not going to say that this is like foolproof because, and there's lots of ads going on here, I apologize. It's not foolproof, meaning that I wouldn't 100% be like, okay, this is going to be perfect once I create my source. What you're going to do with Citation Machine, and some of you might use resources similar to this, like, hey, I'm going to cite a book. And then you can put that information in, or I'm going to enter it manually. And you can type in the information, and it's going to create a citation for you. Now, what I tell students is you still have to know what your citations are supposed to look like. So that's why I use APA OWL at Purdue. Some of you may have like an actual booklet or something like that along those lines. But this, the APA OWL at Purdue, it has kind of like the citation machine built into it, but it also has the rules. So over here on the side, and APA just went to the 7th edition within this last year, so it's a new edition, but it also has the rules. Like, here's what in text is supposed to look like. So you know what it's supposed to look like. Or if you're at the reference list, how am I supposed to cite articles in a journal? So while a citation machine is great to help you build a citation, you also need to be familiar with kind of the rules, because sometimes those citation machine or BiblioNet or some of those other sources don't always get the punctuation or the capitalization or the italics correct. And so if you can kind of reference and be like, okay, hey, well, this is supposed to be italicized and it don't do it over here, you can fix it. But citation machine and things like that are helpful in kind of helping you build and get to know what your citation should look like in general. And then sources like the OWL at Purdue kind of tell like, hey, here's the exact format it should take. So that's just kind of a little blurb about knowing how to cite sources. And then consult people as needed. Reach out for help if you need help on those different strategies. All right, so again, this goes into citing sources. You cite all ideas unless they're purely your own or they're general knowledge. So for instance, as I mentioned before, if you read something and it kind of spawns an idea for you, you can write it in your own words, but you still need to give credit to that original source. The only time, again, you don't have to is if it is your original idea or it's general knowledge. Really basically, the sky is blue. Like, you don't need to cite that. That is general knowledge. Paraphrasing is when you summarize ideas in your own words. And what paraphrasing is not, and I see this a lot, is a student will take a sentence and they'll just change like 1 or 2 words. And they say that it's paraphrased. That's not really paraphrasing. So plugging in synonyms or 1 or 2 words, that's not really paraphrasing. You want to summarize ideas in your own words and then, of course, give credit. All right, so then the next section goes into papers and presentations. Another way to demonstrate your knowledge is by writing these and giving these presentations. So part of the writing process, and this is going to actually be part of your discussion post for this week, is going to center on the writing process. So oftentimes you have to choose a topic, and this can be really overwhelming if the professor's like, oh, you have free range on the topic, and that can be like, whoa, that's too much choice, and sometimes you're not given quite as much freedom. So if you have some freedom and you're like, I don't know how to choose a topic, look and see, maybe do a quick Google search, look at your table of contents of your chapter, look on the database in the digital library and see like, okay, what's out there already. Talk to your teacher, talk to your friends, your classmates, and see what are some possibilities. So kind of brainstorming a topic. You don't want something too narrow, but also not too broad. So it's going to kind of fall in that middle ground. And then the writing process. I'm sure you've heard of this and maybe seen variations of kind of this before. You have that planning, like the pre-writing process, where you find your topic, you gather your sources, you do like an outline, and then you get into your meat of your writing, where you're getting your thesis, your main ideas, your main points, you're fleshing those out, and then you're going to your last part where you're actually like spending time revising and editing that process. And sometimes you'll have to go back to the writing process and then again to the final step, and then maybe back to the planning. So that's why it's a process. It's cyclical. You don't have to follow it linearly. And then there's a difference between revision and editing. When you edit, you're looking at the nitty-gritties. You're looking to see, okay, did I spell everything right? Is my grammar and punctuation okay? Revision is that big picture. Revision is where you look to see, okay, is everything organized okay? Are my thoughts coherent? Is everything flowing? Am I citing everything properly? Making sure that everything fits underneath kind of the assignment details. So you want to allow yourself that work, that time. Sometimes people crunch a paper in like the day before it's due. Well, that doesn't allow you like a day break before looking. But sometimes you need to take a day or two away from your paper and have like fresh eyes and come back to it and see, oh, you know what, this really doesn't make sense here. And this is also the time where you would allow someone else to look at your paper, a peer reviewer, the writing center, someone to give you some tips on what you could improve or change. So that leads into presentations, another way to kind of demonstrate your learning. If this were, if we were meeting face-to-face like we planned, you would be given a presentation at the end of our course, but you often have to give presentations in many different careers. So it's important to be familiar with how to do so. And so a lot of people have anxiety. The best way to combat that is prepare. I cannot tell you how many times students will come to a class to present and it's like they've never looked at their PowerPoint in their life. So making sure you're prepared is one of the ways you can eliminate anxiety right off the bat. Practice it. Stand in front of a mirror. Get a practice audience. Repeat it over and over. Whatever you need to do to make sure that you feel prepared and practiced and as polished as you can. And if you're allowed, take note cards. Take a piece of paper with main points. Do whatever you can to kind of make sure that, if you need those, they're there for you, but you feel confident in your preparation. So the golden rule with presentations, they say, is, here's what I'm going to say it, and then here's what I just said. You want to engage the audience as well. Depending on the length, especially, you want to make sure you put in maybe some questions, some activities, some stories, whatever you can to keep the audience kind of with you. And then if you have an actual physical, visual that you have to do, sometimes presentations are just you by yourself talking. Other times you might have visual aids like a PowerPoint or a Prezi, something along those lines. And so our chapter does go through these different principles that you should follow when using a PowerPoint. And so if you're interested in those, you can kind of take a look at those more inside the chapter. All right, which then leads us to test-taking strategies. So one of the most important things I tell students is you first have to know when the test is. If you pay no attention to your syllabus or calendar or what's going on, obviously you're not in good shape to begin with. And then after knowing when the test is, knowing the format of the test is important. Knowing if it's going to be essay, true, false, fill in the blank, and then knowing the material. What, in general, what is this going to cover? Is this going to cover all of chapter 1, only sections of chapter 1, or whatever the case might be? So our text then goes into kind of some strategies. If you're taking a multiple choice test, some things you want to do is make sure you read the question first and then look at your answers. You kind of want to anticipate the answers before you look at them. Eliminate the wrong answers right away, write on the exam if you're allowed to, and then this last one's really important. Change only if you have a good reason to do so. Oftentimes we change a correct answer to a wrong answer because we second guess ourselves. So only change an answer if you absolutely have a good reason to do so. Short answer and essay exams, you want to prepare for those a little differently than you do a fill in the blank or a multiple choice, because you have to kind of go through this writing process. You have to plan and draft and write and then revisit and proofread. And so you want to look at those a little differently. and prepare for those a little differently. And then you have different modalities of testing. So right now, everything you're doing is basically take home. They're not quite online because they're not timed and they're not graded online like I am grading them manually. But you have your in-class tests, which sometimes are a little stressful to people. You have a time limit. You have the teacher in the room, which is helpful to ask for clarification, but sometimes people get stressed because they see other people finishing or they feel pressure that way. So take home may provide some benefits, although take home you have more time and resources. Teachers often grade them more harshly because you have more time and resources. And then online exams, kind of similar to take home, only you have that like technology piece. So if you wait to the last minute and have technology problems, that might not bode well for you. All right, so that's a quick look at our chapter 5. So I'm going to get back in our class here, and we're going to go to our assignments here. So you'll see you have several assignments. So I'm going to go down to our assignment area. All right, here is our chapter 5 discussion. As I mentioned in the PowerPoint, your discussion is based on the writing process, and you can see it's a really short, quick prompt. It says, after you've read our chapter specifically on the writing process, what steps are involved in writing a paper? So you're writing about writing. So kind of a strange concept, but what kind of things do you have to do to write a paper? So think about all the way from your topic all the way down to your turning it in. Like what things do you have to do? Remember, 250 words. So if you're really under that, I am taking points off your score for that. If you're fairly close, I'm not really marking that off. So please make sure that you're close to 250 words. If you go over, that's fine. I'm not mindful of that. It's okay. What steps are involved in writing a paper? So your week 6 attendance post on this topic here is due Wednesday, July 8th. And then please make sure you also go back in. Don't forget to go back in before Sunday, July 12th and respond to 2 other classmates. Some kind of response by that Sunday night. All right, here is your required assignment for chapter 5. You be the judge. So I'm going to open that file up. All right, academic integrity. So this is something we talked about toward the beginning of the PowerPoint with chapter 5, like that honesty in learning. There is a student code of conduct, and if you cannot find it, I think I'm going to try to upload it real close to this assignment so you can kind of look and see what I'm talking about. But you're going to see there's 4 cases here. They're real quick little cases. In each situation, there may or may not have an academic honesty issue. So what you're going to do, and you can see down here is what you're doing, in each case, so don't just choose one, each case, answer the following questions. Was there an infraction? Meaning, did someone cheat? Did someone plagiarize? What was the case? So if there was, here's what it was. If you don't think there was, go ahead and say, no, the student did nothing wrong. So please make sure that you kind of address that either way. 2, what should the student have done differently? If there was an infraction, or maybe there wasn't an infraction, but they could have done something a little bit, different, what should they have done differently? And then what should the consequence be? Should they fail the test? Should they fail the class? Should they be dismissed from the university? Should the instructor just talk to them? Whatever the case is. There's really not a 100% right or wrong for these, as long as you can kind of support your responses there. And so if it's easy for you, you can just go ahead and, type your responses right here, or you can get into the assignment and do a write submission and type them there, or you can do a Word document and type it in there and upload it. Whatever works best, honestly, is fine. So that's the chapter 5 assignment. It's called You Be the Judge. The next one is the chapter 5 quiz. So this, just like all the other quizzes up to this point, when you open it up, please, again, 2 to 5 sentences. Some of you are turning these in, like a lot of the assignments, like Sunday nights at like 10:30, 11 o'clock. So obviously you're not having a lot of time, and so some of the responses are like a couple words or maybe a sentence. So because you have resources at your disposal, like a take-home quiz, please make sure you're responding in 2 to 5 sentences, and you're allowing yourself enough time to get these assignments completed. So you can go through, again, this is often about academic integrity, presenting, test taking, that kind of thing. So you'll see question 1 talks about plagiarism. What advice can you give them? when do you need to cite a source? So there's 2 questions in one there. There's a little bit in here, kind of a couple things you want to touch on. Some of them are a little bit more straightforward, but make sure you read all the questions thoroughly and then answer each question in 2 to 5 sentences. So that's the Chapter 5 quiz. And then the last thing is the college resource reflection, and I'm giving you a choice. So you choose. I have 3 options there. You are not doing all 3. You do not have to do all 3. So take a look. There's Disability Support Services. So I have the link to their website right here, and it's going to say, hey, you're leaving Blackboard. Like, yep, we're good. So this is going to bring you to the DSS, and it's going to tell you a little bit about, like, obviously it's not open right this minute in terms of physical, but it's going to tell you a little bit about what DSS is. There's information there, and there's stuff on the side, eligibility requirements, how do you get those, what is an accommodation. So there's information there and you can click around. So if you had like an IEP or a 504, this is the equivalent office on our campus that could help you. So if you're interested in that, that's the one I would kind of direct your attention to. If that does not strike your interest, there's the military service one. So if you are currently or have been in the military or interested in joining the military, we do have a military services office here on campus. So again, they just give a little bit of information, and there's a bunch of links down here that talk more about, veterans and military services. I mean, lots of information. And then over here, there's a couple links as well. So if you are currently or previously or hope to be in the military, there is a link for that. And then finally, the other option is the college store. This is not the library. It is the college store where you would get your textbooks, where you get your information for different like supplies. So you can kind of look around in here, be familiar with it, because a lot of students have tons of questions on the college store, and so I thought I would include that as one of the options there. You can kind of look around the different links there. So again, for these resource reflections, remember you are writing a paragraph and you are not telling me about the service or the resource. I know about them. I already am very aware of all the resources here on campus. It's how you personally would benefit. Okay, so make sure that you do that in your reflection. You kind of talk about, oh, I had an IEP in high school. I think this would be a great resource, or I'm currently a veteran, or, I wasn't aware of the college store. So whatever the case is, how you would benefit from that particular resource. Okay. So that is week 6, chapter 5. You'll see again the list of all the assignments. Your discussion post is due Wednesday, July 8th. Everything else here is due Sunday, July 12th. I will be doing a separate video for your last step of your final project. I'll be uploading that shortly so that you have access to that as well, since we are creeping up on the end of the semester already. I also wanted to mention that I am going to be reopening week 1 of the semester for Friday, Saturday, Sunday, July 10th, 11th, 12th, for anyone who maybe missed one or all the assignments in week 1 and that your grade is suffering because of that. So if you wanted to take advantage of that, be on the lookout for that. Okay, hope everyone has a great week. Bye.